could have rolled into the screen.
Well,
we are live and we've already handed out the Humbug Award. We were on it.
I know, we're just ahead of the game. Well, when you know who the real humbug is, you don't wanna hold back.
Oh, it was pretty stiff competition this year, I think. Let me get my computer situated here so it doesn't fall.
we are up.
All right.
Excellent. Andrea will put it on to the museum page.
That's right. So bear with us while we make sure we're posted everywhere we mean to be seen. You can enjoy all of our Christmassy backgrounds and get-ups.
Been looking forward to this one for a while.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done a history on tap.
Yeah, we had a run of a few live ones there in the fall, and then we took a break. So it's nice to be back.
I know, and I was thinking about some of the awards we might hand out. I was like, we should even do a whole episode just on awards.
You should list the awards you have in mind before the episode starts so that our audience has time to think about.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some
So maybe we need to do like a superlatives history on tap when we decide ahead of time, like we're going to do like, our most badass person in history, whatever kind of a thing, but then we can also hand out our superlative awards. Maybe that's how we should do it.
Would we have to dress up for that one?
I mean, I'm up for it.
I don't know, Joe, you're usually the one who's like not into the dressing up of things.
Yeah, I don't know if they make onesies for formal attire.
I just noticed you're wearing a Buffalo Bills Christmas sweater.
Is it Christmas without it? Of course I am.
Yikes.
Not my only one. Also.
Well, this is not my only Grinch suit, so
How are we doing? Are we live on Loudoun yet, Joe?
I don't know. Andrea, give us a heads up if we are on, and then we can go ahead and get started. But yeah, I was looking back to, it doesn't even feel like it was 2020 at this point when we did the first one of the year in January at Dog Money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, what an odd year from that point. We started off great.
We started off real strong.
And then we had like 3 cancellations after that. But then we just started doing them virtual. So there's silver linings.
Yeah, the silver lining is that we've gotten to work with so many cool historians that live far away from us, like Kate here.
This person.
All right, Andrea said 1 more second. She's still trying to get it onto the page, and then we will go.
I'm sure people love our mindless pitter patter.
Isn't that
the mindless pitter patter?
People you care about, mindless pitter patter, as you would say.
The Travis Shaw story.
All right, we are on the Loudoun Museum page, so we can continue the small talk.
All right, we're good to go. Are we good to go?
Yeah, let's
kick it off, Anne-Marie. Do
All
it.
Right.
Do the thing.
Welcome to Christmas on Tap Holiday Spectacular. Tonight we're going to feature many guests, but as usual, you will see myself, Anne-Marie Curie-Layson from the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area, my colleague Travis Shaw, aka The Grinch, also Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area, Joe Rizzo, director of Loudoun Museum, and on the screen right now you see our first guest, Kate Gruber, who's sharing expert stories with us. Before we kick off with some of our stories of holidays past, I just want to say that while most of our stories are Christmas related and historical stories, whatever holiday you are or are not celebrating this year, thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for many of you who have joined us week in and week out and month in and month out as we've put on virtual history on taps and also a handful in person. You guys are what makes this possible. Otherwise, we would all just be drinking alone, which we are also happy to do. So again, before we get started, let's do our traditional run around and tell the folks at home what we are drinking tonight. Travis, what are you drinking?
So I have, underneath this awesome koozie here, my favorite Christmas beer of all time, and that is Tidings Christmas Ale from Port City Brewing in Alexandria, Virginia.
I like how you had the koozie and then the not the koozie.
Man,
Like in a baking show where they put the cookies in, but then they have them already made. Joe, what are you drinking?
I am drinking from Crooked Run Negative Crepe. It's delicious. It's an Imperial sour. I'll say it's very high in Christmas cheer in terms of the content of it, but a delicious one like Crooked Run does, the best when it comes to local sours.
Nice. Kate, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm going on brand with my story this evening, which is about eggnog, but I have laced it with Belmont Farm Copper Kettle Virginia whiskey, which I'm very excited about.
Ooh.
Obviously, I have enjoyed it in the short time that I've had it. So highly recommended.
Yeah, just so everyone knows, that bottle was full when we got on the call
Yep.
30 minutes ago. No, I kid.
No,
And
it's
I'm
amazing.
drinking Caramel Macchiato Stout by Old Busthead in Fauquier County. So without further ado, let's hear more about that nog, Kate.
no, I'm starting off. Come
Oh,
on,
man.
stepped on me.
Yeah, you're right. I had the list written down and everything.
Yeah, wait,
Fine,
before
You wrote
Travis.
it.
Before
How
we get
much of-
started too, if I may, we also very curious what you all are drinking at home. When we kind of just first kick things off, we have some awards that we were thinking of handing out, from Best Comment Award to the Humbug Award. We do have a front runner for that we can get into later. But we want to know, what's your favorite drink of 2020? From the stories we've told, what's your favorite story or moment from History on Tap, whether it be some of the virtual ones we've done or from the ones we've done in person. We've done about 30 in total, from virtual to in person. So we also want to look back on the year as well. And we were hoping for a very active comment section. We've got Andrea behind the scenes watching the comments. So we're going to try to weave those in. So we want to know about what you're drinking, reflections from the year, try to keep that as active as possible as we go through some of these different stories and reminiscences.
Right, it's a celebration tonight.
It is. Travis, tell us a thing.
I'm gonna kick it off. All right, taking it back to the 18th century as I usually do,
Classic.
and I am classic Travis move. I am going to talk about one of my favorite local characters from the 18th century, and that is a young Englishman named Nicholas Cresswell. I see we have some Cresswell fans. So Cresswell he's in his early 20s when he arrives in Virginia in 1774. Like so many other people, he's come to the colonies because he wants to seek a fortune for himself. He wants to acquire land, he wants to acquire wealth, and he thinks that the best way to do that is to come to Virginia and head out to the frontier. Now, why I love Nicholas Cresswell is because he leaves behind an incredibly detailed journal of his experiences in America. And he pulls no punches. He is brutally honest in everything he writes. He also has a great sense of humor. I think in the 21st century, we would refer to him as a very snarky individual. He loves to throw shade on people, which makes for a really entertaining read. It really stands out. He goes into a lot of detail about the practice of slavery. He casts a lot of, writes a lot about the horrors of slavery, the hypocrisy of enslavers. He writes about this incredible trip he takes all the way out to the Ohio Valley, where he encounters a number of Native Americans and things like that out on the frontier. During the American Revolution, he is very snarky about the American soldiers who he sees. They're dirty and undisciplined, and the kind of hypocrisy of violence directed towards loyalists like himself. So it's a really eye-opening read. But the other reason I love Nicholas Cresswell is because this man was an absolute party animal. He would drink he did not need an excuse to throw a few back and have a great party. So one of the things that actually stood out to me as I was putting this together for tonight was he complains that Virginians don't celebrate Christmas. Every year, Christmas Day, he's like, Christmas not really observed in these parts. At one point, he's in Loudoun County, and he says that the only people observing Christmas Day are the Dutch, so the German immigrants, people in the area around Waterford and Lovettsville and so forth. He does note that, kind of typical for the 18th century, 12th night, January 6th, the 12th day of Christmas, tends to be the big party day. At one point, he's actually in January 6th of 1775, before the start of the Revolutionary War, he's invited to a 12th night party in Alexandria. And he kind of records some of the celebrations that Virginians have for this holiday. He talks about a large cake that they bake. They give each person a slice. As each person takes their slice, they all draw cards out of a hat. And whoever gets the king has to host next year's 12th night party. Whoever gets the queen has to bake next year's cake.
Classic.
Yeah, it's, I mean, kind of a fun little thing, but from there it all kind of goes downhill. And I'm going to read you a little bit of his passage here. First of all, he talks about the ladies who are all very fond of dancing, but he did not think that they performed it very gracefully, with the greatest elegance. Again, throwing a little shade on the Virginia ladies. He talks about the everlasting jigs, you know, these dances that they're having in Virginia that are not familiar to an Englishman. Says, you know, these dances always last as long as a fiddler can play. It's sociable, but I think it looks more like a bacchanalian dance than one in a polite assembly.
Which, if anyone is bacchanalian, it's Nicholas Cresswell, right?
Oh.
So here he is being all sassy about, okay, fine.
Yeah, we'll get
Fine.
into the depths of Nicholas Cresswell in a second here. He writes about the punch, the wine, the chocolate and coffee being served. Obviously no tea, because this is the colonies in 1775. My favorite part, though, is at the end of this party. He says, I went home about 2 a.m, but part of the company stayed, got drunk, and had a fight. Now, I want to mention that because that's going
already.
What's
Yes.
that?
There's a theme already.
Yeah, this is definitely going to set a theme when it comes to Nicholas Cresswell. You know, but I love this story because it's very different from, I think, what we think of in the 21st century as a typical Christmas party. I mean, I've never gotten into a fight at a Christmas party before, but anyways, when the Revolutionary War begins, he is in Leesburg, Virginia. He's stuck in Virginia, more or less under house arrest. You know, as an Englishman, he's definitely suspicious. People don't want him moving around the colony for fear that he might be a spy or something like that. So he is going to spend the next 2 years or so more or less under arrest in Leesburg under close supervision, which gives him plenty of time to engage in his favorite activity, which, as I said, was drinking. Over the years, he and his friends get stupidly drunk, heartily drunk, feloniously drunk, which might be my favorite, intolerably drunk, damnable drunk, and princely drunk. So obviously there's a lot of material to work with here, but I did want to share just 2 of his infamous holiday season benders. The first one I'm going to read from occurs on January 6th, 1776. So again, this is kind of 12th night, 1776, a year after the party I mentioned before. All right. Spent the evening at Mr. Johnson's with our last night's company. He is going to camp. All of us got most feloniously drunk. Captain McCabe, and these are names that you'll recognize if you're familiar with Leesburg history. McCabe's Ordinary. Captain McCabe, Hugh Nielsen, and I kept it up all night. The next day, January 7th, went to bed about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Stupidly drunk.
Stupidly.
Not been in bed or asleep for 2 nights. And then the next day, January 8th, my last 2 days' conduct will not bear reflection. The uneasiness of my mind causes me to drink deeper when in company to elevate my spirits. Now, the thing I love about Cresswell is he'll go on these benders. I mean, that's like a 3-day drunk. But every time he writes this reflection, he's like, I'm never going to do that again. This is terrible.
We've all said that in
We've all
said
been
that.
there.
Fast forward to December 9th, 1776. So a little later on that year, getting ready for the Christmas season. This is probably the most epic bender in his journal. All right. This morning, I was remarkably low-spirited. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Mr. Hugh Nielsen came and insisted on my spending the evening at the Billet, which is like their hangout. I've spent it with a vengeance. With Fleming, Patterson, Moore, Captain Johnson, H. Nielsen, sent them all to bed drunk, and I am now going to bed myself at 9 a.m, as drunk as an honest man could wish. Tuesday, the next day. Got up at 2 p.m. Got drunk before 10 with the same company I was with yesterday. And am now going to bed at 2 a.m, most princely drunk indeed. I saw all my companions in bed before I left them, but most damnable drunk. A fine course of life, truly, drunk every night. And it goes on. December 11th, next day, much indisposed this morning. Yeah, I'll say. I hear my pet companions and brothers in iniquity coming upstairs, but I'm determined to keep sober today. Yeah.
Not today.
Determined. Sure enough, the next night, December 12th, last night was the worst we have had since we first commenced the trade of drunkards. Mr. Kirk and P. Cavan joined us. We instituted a foolish society by the name of the Black-Eyed Club.
Nice.
I was president and Mr. Moore secretary. All of us got most intolerably drunk. This is the first day I have had any time for reflection this week. Uneasiness of mind first engaged me in this last debauch. Good company induced me to continue it, and now bitter reflection, an aching head, a sick stomach, a trembling hand, and a number of disagreeable concomitants that are annexed to this detestable vice causes me to quit the pursuit. So, let's raise a glass to my favorite 18th century party animal, Nicholas Cresswell, and to the Black-Eyed Club. And please, everybody out there, celebrate responsibly. Don't be a Cresswell this holiday season.
Yes. Cheers.
He straddles a fine line between the Humbug Award and the Christmas Spirit Award.
I mean,
Yeah.
he goes back and forth. I didn't tell the story. There's one where they get so drunk that they set the house on fire 3 times and break their friend's leg. So,
As you do.
just normal stuff.
It happens.
Bro
like
stuff.
that
Bro
sometimes.
Your
stuff.
friend could then play Tiny Tim.
I also would like to suggest a remake of like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, but with the 7 different kinds of drunkenness, right? There's princely, there's damnable, right?
Felonious.
Felonious. I would.
Felonious is playing a saxophone in the back somewhere. Smoky room.
And Travis, I'm glad you brought up a cake again, as people in the comments section are pointing out. One of the biggest leaders in terms of story of the year was Eagle Cake.
Eagle Cake. Yeah.
The comment section is buzzing with Eagle Cake once again. You really left a mark with that cake. Another holiday, actually, bringing cakes.
Yes. 4th of July.
Here's hoping in 2021 we can reinstitute the Black-Eyed Club. So
That's
Here,
what
here.
we need.
Here.
Well, I'm going to hand it off to Kate Gruber for another tale of some drunken shenanigans.
Yeah, you really set me up. The Grinch set me up really well. Like I said, there's a theme. So we're going to jump ahead. I like that you ended in 1776 because now we're going to 1826. So kind of that tail end of like the long Revolutionary era. Jefferson has passed away. Adams has passed away. So 1826 is kind of that bookend year. So it's 1826. Picture the moment. You're a cadet at the prestigious West Point Military Academy. It's 4 a.m. on Christmas morning, and you're standing at attention in the back of your dorm room with a hat over your face because you've just ingested a gallon of whiskey, and you think that if you can't see your commanding officer can't see you. And therefore, that right there is just part of the, how do I want to say it, the flawed logic of what becomes known as the West Point Eggnog Riot of 1826. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. It's such a fun story. So backing up, the West Point Military Academy in New York, it's established in 1802 by Thomas Jefferson, but it originally wasn't that elite and prestigious school that we think of it as today. None of that really started until about 1817, when a man named Sylvanus Thayer becomes superintendent there. So before Thayer gets to West Point, There's really not much academic rigor going on. Students were like wildly out of control. The previous superintendent seemed to have some issues. I read at one point he thought all the professors were out to get him, and so he had them all put under house arrest, and he was trying to run around teaching all of the classes himself. So that gives you an example of just how not West Point really was in the early part of the 19th century. So Thayer gets there in 1817, and he has a lot of work to do. Thayer's from Braintree, Massachusetts. He's the valedictorian of his class at Dartmouth. And then he himself went to West Point, and he graduates in 1808. So to bring this around to Virginia, I know these are supposed to be local stories. All roads do lead to Virginia. Thayer actually ends up during the War of 1812 directing the line of defenses and the fortifications at Norfolk. So there is a little Virginia connection here too. He does such a great job. The US military sends him to the École Polytechnique in Paris for 2 years. Apparently, Parisian militaria was like the pride of the European world at the time. So the US government sends him there to buy books and maps and to spend some time learning military tactics at that school. He comes back and he's put in charge of West Point. So all of that to tell you, he's a very serious military man. He has some very serious changes he's trying to make at West Point to bring the reputation really out of the gutter, because it's bad. So to do that, one of the first things he does is he institutes these really, really strict rules and code of conduct for the cadets. So among other things, he comes up with the very famous demerit system. That starts with Thayer in 1817. He removes any kind of like class bias. He doesn't allow any students to come in with any of their own money. He doesn't allow students to receive any money from home. So it kind of breaks down this class structure that was really inherent at West Point at the time. Students cannot leave campus. They have to take all of their meals in the mess hall together. And he prohibits, no ifs, ands, or buts, smoking, gambling, and drinking. I know.
Boo!
But
What
wait,
a Grinch.
yeah, that's
Now
the
we found the
humbug
house
award.
Yeah, humbug award.
Humbug award. So the cadets, up until this point, the cadets really had been permitted to drink on very special occasions. One of them was the 4th of July. 4th of July, 1824-25, really big deal in the United States. And apparently it was so enthusiastically celebrated in 1825 with the addition of alcohol. It was so bad that Thayer says, nope, no more alcohol for you at all. And so July 4th, 1826 comes and goes, no party, no alcohol, no incident, right? Thayer thinks he's getting away with it, but little does he know what students start plotting for 6 months down the line. So Thayer says, okay, guys, it's Christmas. You're still getting your traditional eggnog. Eggnog is a very, I guess it's very well entrenched in the Christmas celebrations at West Point at the time. But guess what? It's going to be dry. No alcohol for your eggnog. So sorry, but that's what you get for taking advantage of it last year at 4th of July, apparently. So in 1826, there are about 260 cadets at West Point, and some of these cadets are living in the North Barracks. And about 9 of them decide that, you know, they're just going to have to smuggle their alcohol in if they really want to have the party that they want for Christmas, as you know, as you do. This is a very all-American story, I think. So they decide that they're going to smuggle in some alcohol and they're going to have their own little party to end all parties. So on the evening of December 26th, 3 cadets get in boats. They bribe the officer on guard duty at that evening. They give him 35 cents to keep his mouth shut. A whole 35 cents, which I read somewhere is like $3 today. So hope it
Yeah.
Here's a cup of
Make
coffee.
it
You know?
rain.
That's right. So they bribe the security, the guard on duty. They get in a boat and they cross the Hudson River to go to a place called Martin's Tavern, where they get themselves like riotously drunk, and then convince the tavern keeper to sell them gallons of whiskey to take back to West Point. So these guys are at one tavern getting drunk and then buying whiskey to bring back. And then there's another group of guys at another tavern getting rum to bring back. So they make it back to the North Barracks at West Point, and the guys with the whiskey, they take their whiskey to room number 33. The guys with the rum take their rum to room number 5. There they hide it in their footlockers until the planned party, which is the evening of Christmas Eve going into Christmas morning. That's the traditional party time, getting super drunk and having a lot of fun and drinking before revelry on Christmas Day. So Thayer's not an idiot. He kind of knows something's going to go down. So he puts a guy named Captain Ethan Allen Hitchcock on alert in the North Barracks and basically says, hey, spend the night Christmas Eve, keep your eyes and ears open for anything that's going to happen. You're in charge. Meanwhile, Christmas Eve, Thayer goes and has his own party with wine and alcohol and all kinds of other, hypocrite shenanigans. So he's doing his own thing, having his own party, and puts poor Hitchcock in charge. So Hitchcock is sleeping, and numerous little parties start popping up in on various floors, in various dorm rooms on various floors of the North Barrack at West Point. But it's really the noise from upstairs in room 28 that wakes him up at around 4 a.m. because he had fallen asleep around midnight because he's like, nothing's gonna happen, I'm fine. He just dozes off. So 4 a.m., room 28, what the heck is going on? Hitchcock barges into room 28 and he finds 6 drunken cadets in the room and 2 more that are described later in the court-martial as sleeping, which means passed out drunk. So he says, okay, stop drinking, put it all away. Everybody goes back to your room. I'm going back to my room as well. Good night. So these cadets are a little pissed off that, Hitchcock dared to ruin their party. They were sleeping anyway. I don't know what the problem is, but anyway, so they decide that they are going to really show Hitchcock, who's in charge here. It's Christmas. We do what we want. We've now had 3 gallons of whiskey seeping through our bloodstream. What are you going to do about it? A guy named William Murdoch is allegedly utters the words, "Get your dirks and your bayonets and your pistols if you have them. Before this night is over, Hitchcock will be dead." This is like a 19-year-old drunken buffoon who has again, ingested like a gallon worth of whiskey. So over the course of about the next 15 minutes or so, they go to Hitchcock's dorm room that he's staying in, pounding on the door, running away. Pounding on the door, running away. Pounding on the door, running away. 3 times. Hitchcock wakes back up. He looks out the door and he's like, okay, like you woke me up. There's nobody here, but I see there's a party now going on over here. So he sees a party going on in room number 5 of the North Barrack. And at some point, this is where things get really fun, because not only is he seeing evidence of a party going on, but he's also seeing a very young cadet by the name of Jefferson Davis, who's walking up and down the hallway, walking in and out of room number 5. And by walking, I think that's probably fairly generous.
Yeah.
Because it's like 4:30 in the morning now. They've all been partying, and by all accounts, Davis was like the biggest ringleader in this whole shenanigan. So
Classic.
So he sees Davis in room 5 and then walk out of room 5. And at some point, Davis must have seen him too, because Hitchcock makes it into room 5 where there's this party going on. So this is what's going on in my, what happens is that Hitchcock makes it into room number 5. And then shortly after that, in bursts the drunken, inebriated Jefferson Davis, who says, "Put away the grog, Captain Hitchcock is coming." And he's effectively saying that to Hitchcock because Hitchcock has already made it in the room. And it's just one of those stories where, I just wonder what everybody else in the room is thinking. Like, he's behind you, He must have just broken, not even seeing Hitchcock standing right in front of him.
This is like every bad college movie ever.
Yeah.
Like, this is Animal House 1826. Like,
it is. Everyone has experienced this, right? So I think that this is the room that when Hitchcock barges in, he sees drunken cadet thinking like, if I can't see him, he can't see me. There are also 2 drunken cadets huddled together, hiding under a blanket, because for some reason that makes sense.
Toddler
They're
logic.
just,
Toddler
you know,
logic.
That's how drunk
Right.
they are.
Exactly, drunken toddler logic. So that happens. So that's happening in room 5. It's now about 4:30 a.m. And at this point, that other cadet has already basically said, we're going to get Hitchcock tonight. So he's gone up and down the hallways, and he is trying to incite this riot amongst the cadets, most of which are now drunk themselves. They're running through the hallways, up and down the stairwells. They've got bayonets drawn. They've got swords out. Somebody's brandishing a pistol. It is anarchy, and they're calling out all of the officers in the dorm. They throw rocks through the windows. They take all of the balusters in the stairwell and rip them off. They're throwing them like clubs and using them as weapons. A guy named Lieutenant Thornton, poor guy, sticks his head out of his dorm room to try to see what's going on. He gets smacked in the head with a piece of firewood and ends up passed out unconscious on the floor for a while. Now it's 5 a.m. A cadet accidentally shoots into Hitchcock's room, misses him by this much, thank God. And this is the point where there is now a rumor going on that the Bombardiers, which is the rival artillery group, is on their way to restore order to the North Barracks. It's a total rumor. No one knows how it gets started. But what happens now is that now you have all of the sober cadets waking up, not knowing what the hell is going on, and not knowing who's in charge, or if they're being attacked, and if they are being attacked, you know, who am I fighting? Am I fighting the guys with the swords, or are the guys with the swords and the bayonets actually trying to protect me? It's anarchy. It is anarchy, and half of those anarchists are absolutely to the wind at this point. So it's just an absolute mess. The only thing that really saves all of this is the sound of revelry at about 6:05 that morning. When all of the guys parade out on the parade ground that morning, it's said that everyone from the North Barracks just kind of crawls out of this completely trashed barracks, and they are just absolutely disheveled. And then all the guys coming out of the South Barracks are like, what happened to them? And so it must have been a really fun parade morning. So Thayer finally gets a report about this. It's Christmas morning, it's Christmas Day now. He finally gets a report about this on the afternoon of Christmas. And investigations in January reveal that out of the 260 students at West Point, about 1/3 of them are actually involved and can be implicated in the riot officers and in this drunken, disorderly conduct that takes place on Christmas Eve and going into Christmas Day. Thayer realizes they can't expel a whole 1/3 of the school. He has spent pretty much his entire career up to this point restoring the reputation of West Point, trying to make it that prestigious military academy that the United States really needs at this moment. And so he decides he's going to go after the ringleaders. He ends up expelling 19 cadets. You can read the depositions in the court-martial cases online. There's some really colorful language that people use to describe what's going on. Oddly enough, Jefferson Davis is actually not implicated anymore than his original arrest on that night. I guess I left that out. After he drunkenly shouts for everybody to put away the grub because you know who's coming, he's arrested on the spot, and Hitchcock says, go back to your room. He essentially just passes out and stays there the whole night, which is the only thing that saves him from sheer embarrassment. And
I like to think that Jefferson Davis is like the dweeb at the party who like keeps trying to get in, you know, and everyone's like, just go away, Jeff. And like he's like drinking people's empties or something like that. So, you know, like when I don't know, I'm sure that's not what happened. That's just what I like to imagine.
I think you're right. And somebody, when I was reading about this, one historian made the comment that him falling asleep that night, AKA passing out drunk, was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to him.
Yeah.
Because, you know, had he have gotten expelled from West Point,
Yeah, no Secretary of War, no
No
Mexican War,
Secretary of
no
War,
President of
no-
the Confederacy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So one of the most incredible legacies of the eggnog riot is that they actually end up tearing down the North Barracks. They don't
Wow.
want, so not only was it just completely in shambles after this riot inside the building, but they don't even want any memory of the riot to exist on the landscape at all. It's like, nope, we're done, total it.
That's how you know it was a good party.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right.
When you,
There's no
when
coming
you
back
have
from
to-
that.
Right, like when you ruin a piece of the landscape, when you ruin built structure like that to the point where it's like we can't even psychologically come back from this.
Right.
Like, we just have to burn it and
Cresswell,
start over.
Cresswell might have set a building on fire 3 times, but no building was condemned because of his drinking. So that
In
the
so
bar,
many ways.
there's a new
That's
bar.
a pretty high bar. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing I love about both of these stories is it just shows that years may come and go, but the stupidity of young men with alcohol is universal. It does not
People are
matter
people.
what century
Amen
it
to
is.
I
I'll
like to
drink to
think
that.
I like to think this is where these immortal words were coined. You've got to fight for your right to party.
Cheers to that.
And as several people in the comments section have pointed out, we all have some college stories.
Oh yeah.
Century it is, as Terry pointed out, college leads to some foggy mornings and some pretty good stories. And as Drew and Chris are mentioning, yeah, Jefferson Davis, maybe some telltale signs that he gets into trouble. And I also
Yeah.
can't remember what episode it was, but at some point we got into A Secession is Christmas, and I have no idea how that came about. But Jefferson Davis might win the Secession is Christmas award.
Might.
And as Chris New also points out, generally agrees with fighting the people with the swords over those with the firearms and bayonets. Sound logic that sometimes goes away the more eggnog you drink.
So Chris was my roommate in college, so I'm gonna ask Chris to just stop right now and
Chris,
not share any Cresswell-esque stories or Davis-esque stories from when we were in school together.
I would like
David.
to point out though, of the guys that get implicated in all of this, and please go online and read, because these are, there is a Supreme Court justice that is involved in this. Robert E. Lee didn't drink, but testified. These are your leaders.
That doesn't surprise me.
He's a Boy Scout. He threw
Yeah,
everyone else under the bus. Is my
Narking
bet.
on everyone.
Yeah, he's
Right.
10 by 10 kind of guy.
He never has nog with whiskey in it to begin with. Wow. Well, thank you, Kate. What a fabulous
Thank you,
story.
Kate.
Thank you for having me,
Thank you
guys. Happy
so
holidays.
much. Merry Christmas. And I think now we're going to introduce another one of our fan favorite guests from 2020 who's going to be joining us tonight. Any second now, if technology works.
It is
Who's that knocking
happening.
at the door?
Who is that?
Could it be?
Did it knock? Did it work?
Uh-oh.
I hear some bells ringing in the background.
Is it reindeer
Up
on the rooftop?
I think it is.
Oh, Alison Herring.
Here
Hi.
she is.
Hi. I am back. I gotta fix my screen for a moment.
Please go
So,
ahead. Everyone out there, you probably recognize Allison from a few different programs we've had. She was on our Scandals History on Tap this past spring. We also had her on a little after that in the spring, early summer to talk about a seance that happened in Leesburg. And today she's back to tell us more about Christmas time as we're entering kind of the middle Victorian years. So
And I understand eggnog is going to play a role
I
again.
pulled a bait and switch. Eggnog Gate is not tonight.
not tonight.
It's not tonight. No, it's not. Well, if there's time, what-
There's
Sorry, Joe.
time. Just
if
go.
there's time at the end, we can go over Eggnog Gate. And I think the
Yes.
award, if we're going for awards, I think based on the seance, the scandal one where we learned measuring 6 yards of tape means kissing on purpose at a party in front of people. And now we're going to do Christmas in the 1840s. I'm going for like most fun in the 19th century award.
All right.
Starting in the
All
19th
right.
Yeah. So thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be here. This was fun to prepare this week. And the reason I pulled back on Eggnog Gate, one, we've all had plenty to drink this evening, which by the way, I have Smithic here. That's what I'm drinking, because I didn't share that earlier.
Nice.
Yeah, solid choice.
Bottle.
Good call.
And my festive glass. We're in a pandemic, and if there's a theme this year, it's that we can't gather. I mean, look at us. We're in a Zoom. We can't gather with our family and our friends the way that we would like to. And if there's a theme in the Powell family papers, which are held at William and Mary, it's family separation. The family were separated. The parents and 6 children were separated most of the family's life. And that is why there is such a huge volume of letters, because what they're trying to do when some of their children have been sent away to school or they've been sent away to visit some relatives for different reasons is Mother Powell, she is trying to give her children a slice of home. And so she will go into all this rich detail and explain what everybody's doing and where everybody is, down to the point of like hitting pause, like Nina's asleep under my chair, you know, Lloyd's trying to climb up Hattie over there on the couch. And so like she goes into that level of detail. And they do that for Christmas because they're separated most of the time at Christmas. The last Christmas they spent together as a family unit was in 1847. So even long before the war, they were separated at Christmas. And so what that, you know, that's, and it's sad. And their letters are heartbreaking because they're heartbroken, just like we are, that they can't gather. But what the legacy of that is that they leave us this detailed window. Like we can feel like we're trudging up through the snow in Loudoun County, because I know y'all are covered in snow right now, and just peer through the window and watch Christmas unfold like some kind of a movie with the detailed letters that they leave behind. So the number of letters that mention Christmas that I've counted up that I've been through so far is 31. So if the average letter is 4 pages a piece, we've got 124 pages of Christmas in the Powell family papers. For the Loudoun crowd, the Powells are Charles Levin Powell, his wife, Selena Lloyd Powell, and their children, Rebecca, Hattie Lloyd, Minna, Charlie, and Nina. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a very high level overview of Christmas in the 1840s, how they, like all the other couple of days leading up to Christmas, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then they also give us insight into what this holiday meant for the enslaved for Loudoun County, and particularly for 3 enslaved individuals, Margaret, Lucinda, and Franklin. So let's dive in. So Christmas for the Powells in the 1840s was a big deal. It was a very big deal, at least for the Powells. So they were elite people, almost aristocratic in Loudoun County. They were wealthy, and they also were Episcopalian, and a lot of their social crowd are the St. James Episcopal crowd. And so for that group, Christmas was a very big deal, and they talked of little else for the whole month leading up to Christmas, just like we do today. And Mrs. Powell talks about that even when she's running the school in Winchester, like, I have heard nothing else but Christmas for the past 30 days. It's driving her crazy because Christmas for her was a stressful time. Like Christmas can be a stressful time for lots of families today. It really wasn't that different in the 1840s. In fact, it was probably more stressful. They called it Holy Day, or I'm going to travel for the holy days. So today we say holiday, and that's, I've lost the word for it, but that's a form of that. And they will say holiday every now and again, but most of the time they say holy day or holy days, like the girls are going to travel for the holy days. You know, I think what's driving so many, because this is going to sound like something out of a Christmas Carol. It's going to sound like 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. The Christmas Carol was published in 1843. And A Visit from St. Nick, which we know as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, was published in 1823. And so I think that is what's helping to inspire a lot of the way that Americans are celebrating Christmas at this time, particularly in Loudoun County. They love to gather for the holidays. So gathering's a big deal. So family who are around gather. They'll have a big party. They'll have a ball. Balls are common at Christmas. Leading up to Christmas, they decorate the church. Hattie loves to do that. So shout out to the St. James Episcopal Church in Leesburg, because we know, what's up, y'all? We know how they decorated it for Christmas of 1849, because Hattie shows up and she leaves us this rich description that they hung a star over the pulpit So somebody's up there teetering on a ladder, and we know who that is. It's Mrs. Marsh. She's up there teetering on the ladder, and I'm not sure who she was. She had two sons. There were two young men named Marsh who lived in Leesburg. They were teachers, and this may be their mother visiting, who's now climbed a ladder and is hanging the decorations. Below that, they hung the letters JHS, which spells out a Latin phrase, which in English means Jesus, Savior of mankind. And below that, they hung the letters King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And Hattie studiously counted out the letters. There were 28. She was very impressed. I think she's standing at the bottom of the ladder, like handing the letters up. But oh, they had a problem. When the letters got up, some of them were reversed. Oops. And we do know who was in charge of the lettering. She said it was Miss Lucy. So Miss Lucy had to run home, and that is Miss Lucy Elsie of Leesburg. That's a big name in Leesburg. So she had to go home and fix the letters. Maybe she painted them on the wrong side. Hattie's not clear. She just said they were facing that. But she said that they worked for 7 hours. She showed up at 10 a.m. and they worked until 5 p.m. getting the church decorated. She was excited to be a part of that. Things really began to kick off for Christmas by Christmas Eve, though. So the fact that I've got a tree up and I got some angels over here and a stocking, like that would confuse the Powells because they would be like, it's December 18th, weirdo. Like they didn't really start until Christmas Eve. And then, like you all have already mentioned, would celebrate for several days after that. They don't mention if it was 12 or not, but it just continues for like, feels like a week and a half after that. So on Christmas Eve, that's when they start arranging all the gifts around the table. Bet you thought I was going to say tree. They never mention a Christmas tree in all of the letters, and it's glaringly absent. Now we know the tree was becoming more popular at this time, but it must not have caught on with the Powells or they didn't have access to a quick evergreen tree out back. I don't know what the logistics of that were, but they don't mention a tree. So what they use is a big table in the parlor, some piece of furniture they already have, and they arrange all their gifts on that. And so the way this worked was you were supposed to find your moment in the evening to go upstairs, get your gifts, come down and arrange them around the table. Every parent knows the challenge right now is now you've got to keep the kids away from this table. So Nina and Charlie, Travis, you have no idea what I'm talking about.
This has been my day today. Like you have no idea how real this is to me right now.
So touching. So somebody has to be put in charge of little Charlie and Nina in another room to keep them entertained so they don't come barging into the room to disturb all of the gifts. Also on Christmas Eve, they hung stockings round the bureau. Bet you thought I was going to say chimney. No, I think that's a fire hazard. Like this is, okay, my fireplace is not lit right now for my dad who's watching. He's like, I know she does not have a stocking hanging. It's not lit. It's just there for effect.
Being safe.
So they were hanging stockings around the bureau, and these are legit stockings. So they start to get very heavy, and they will talk about how weighted down they are because they're putting heavy stuff in there. You know, because you were supposed to find you had your stocking stuffer. So just like your gifts, you find your moment surreptitiously in the evening and go in and put your stocking stuffers into the stockings. And those would include things like apples, a lemon. One year Hattie got a lemon. Citrus fruit was a big deal. You might find a corn cake. If you are Uncle Fred, you might find a switch in your stocking, which Hattie Powell put in there one year. And when Uncle Fred digs deeper, he's going to find 2 frozen potatoes that little Charlie and Nina put in there, which I was like, frozen potatoes, it's just a rock at that point. Like, how long does that take to thaw out before you can actually eat it?
I know what I'm doing to my daughter this year.
Frozen potatoes.
Frozen potatoes.
Frozen potatoes, lemons. You heard it here, folks.
I heard you like frozen. I bet you like frozen potatoes.
Just be like, you know, it's a history Christmas this year. For those of you who can see family, yes, frozen potatoes, a little apple in there. One year Hattie got a rosebud. It'd be interesting to see how that would go over with my nephews. Here's your flower for Christmas.
Anything goes this Christmas. Like this is like the perfect out for parents that don't want to put up a tree. It's like, just throw the gifts under the table. We can, you know, write it off as a historical moment.
Yeah,
Put your
I don't
stocking,
know.
yeah.
The post office lost it. I don't know. We all have so much drama this Christmas. Yeah. So then Christmas night, the fight becomes just like today. You got to get the kids to go to bed, and Nina and Charlie are not having it. They're so excited. They don't want to go to bed. Eventually, even after you get them in bed, they are up at 5 a.m. and they are running down the stairs by moonlight. But there's a rule: you can't open any presents. So they will go back upstairs. You can't open presents until everybody else is down. So problem solved. They're going to go upstairs, bang, 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 and get everybody up and drag them downstairs. At 5 in the morning, they emphasize for them to be able to open their gifts. So the children got things like toys and books, and got a lot. I mean, for the Powells, they would get between 12 to 15 gifts a year. So it was kind of just as commercialized to now, I mean, then as it is now. Christmas morning, that's when they would open their gifts. Other gifts like the adults would get, they got a lot of books. So most of the Powells will list out inventory style, all the gifts they got in these letters. So it's like a full study of what these people were giving each other for Christmas. They would make embroidered bookmarks for their friends, like pretty elaborate embroidered bookmarks for their friends. You might get a new bonnet, mittens, buckskin gloves, a penknife. The boys always get knives, which Mrs. Powell is not happy about. Uncle Fred does not check with her. So Charlie and Lloyd have more knives than they know what to do with. Because I feel like
Knives,
they get
potatoes.
It's like a total uncle move too. Like,
Fred.
Give them knives.
yeah, they'll be fine.
Kids, they'll love it.
Charlie got his big sister Hattie prunes one year for Christmas, which apparently was not a terrible gift in the 19th century. Like,
Oh, no,
I might throw my brother out of the house, but okay, they got prunes. So then they would go to church on Sunday. It's been decorated by Hattie, and she's probably in there all proud about what she did. And she's telling people there's 28 letters. Miss Elsie might have messed up one of them, and now she had to go back and fix them. Then they would come back and have dinner, and their dinners sound not terribly dissimilar to ours today. They would have a big turkey, venison, salsify, that's a root vegetable, potatoes, and what Lloyd called rich, old-fashioned plum pudding. So if you thought plum pudding was old school now, he was calling it old school in the 1840s. Jelly, sponge cake, little hat tip to the cake theme, and eggnog. They enjoyed eggnog, and they would spike it with brandy. And then there would be the weather. It's usually snowy, or very often it was, because they described they would love to go ice skating, which makes me nervous because they were always out on some pond or frozen river.
They made it over.
They just had to tie some of those knives to their shoes, you know?
Yeah, I
Got
mean,
all those.
That's an excellent idea. Excellent way to use those. And they always described the sleigh bells. Sleigh bells were it's not just on the Victorian Christmas cards. It's not just in the Christmas songs. Like, they put bells on their sleighs, and they would talk about as late at 9 o'clock at night, you could hear the sleigh bells in every direction. Which is hard to tell if they're saying that like it's 9 o'clock at night and you can hear sleigh bells in every direction, or if it's cheerful like 9 o'clock at night and we can hear sleigh bells in every direction. So it does. I mean, that's a high level overview of what Christmas looked like in the 1840s in Leesburg and Loudoun as a whole. Not terribly dissimilar today. And it does sound like Was the Night Before Christmas, which they would recite. They loved it, or A Christmas Carol. But this wasn't the Christmas that a lot of the people in the Powell household had. They enslaved about 20 people at any given time. There was stress caused by this at Christmas time. And so that's how it comes up in these Powell papers. And I've decided to focus my last minute or two of remarks on Margaret, Lucinda, and Franklin, because each of these enslaved people are being leased. And the holidays created the most upheaval and pain and distress for those who were being leased, because these labor contracts in Virginia, and particularly in the Powell papers, who I can speak mostly just to these, the labor contracts were on an annual calendar basis. So in general, Margaret was somebody that they enslaved. She was a young woman, probably hailed from Llangollen, so she was from Loudoun. She was leased out generally on or about January 1st or 2nd. Through about December 23rd or 24th. So the people who are leased out are generally back at their enslaver's home for the holidays, so for Christmas. And that means a couple of things. It's tempting to think, oh, like Margaret's probably getting excited. She's coming back to the Powells and back to an enslaved community at the Powells that are a community of her origin. So it's probably some sisters, cousins. Strong circumstantial evidence indicates that the enslaved people that Charles Powell had came from Llangollen. So these are people she's probably known all of her life. But Margaret had tension with the Powells. I think she was passive aggressive as a form of rebellion, and I say good for her. But the stress, that's why she was being leased out. Mrs. Powell I'm not dealing with this. So when Margaret comes back, she knows she's going to be evaluated, and Mrs. Powell says that I'm going to evaluate her and determine, are we going to keep her or are we going to lease her out again? And so Margaret doesn't know, am I going to be leased out to the same place where I've been leased out this past year? Or is she going to send me somewhere else? Or God forbid, am I going to be sold south? That's her worst nightmare. And so the approach of the holidays created a lot of stress and angst, heartbreak, probably depression, trauma. You can only imagine what this was like. It's a worthy thing to try to put yourself in their shoes to try to envision this. And the same was true for Lucinda and Franklin. So even though the Powells enslaved people, they also leased people. So these Lucinda and Franklin likely had a very specific skill. And this was when they lived in Leesburg. So as the holidays approached, Mrs. Powell would lament, like Lucinda and Franklin aren't going to be here, because she knows that since they're being leased, they're going to go back to the place where they are enslaved and not be there for the holidays. And it affects Christmas, because Mrs. Powell one year in Leesburg said, well, we might as well accept the invitation to visit your aunt and uncle because Lucinda and Franklin aren't going to be here. So that is how crucial Lucinda and Franklin were to that household, that it affected the way that they were going to be able to celebrate. They were going to have to go up to Locust Hill, which is a home north of Leesburg, to celebrate the holiday, since Franklin and Lucinda weren't going to be around. And we don't know who enslaved Franklin and Lucinda, sadly, and we don't know where Margaret was being sent. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that we just don't have. But what all three of them had in common is that they were now traveling over the holidays. And that's something I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this week, is how many enslaved people in Loudoun were on the road between December 23rd and January 1st or 2nd, either because they're outbound, they've got to get to their new location by January 2nd, or they're inbound, they're traveling back. But I think it had to have been not uncommon, if not common, to see African Americans traveling on foot. Perhaps they were escorted in a wagon. It's a little dangerous because the slave patrols are riding around, and they could stop any African American for any reason, even if they were traveling for reasons that were deemed legitimate at the time. But it would have been a dangerous thing, I think. But I think it would have been not uncommon for them to be traveling. And when I put myself in Margaret's shoes, I tend to think, well, there's an opportunity there. Mrs. Powell doesn't know exactly what day I'm going to be making it back. We know she's not close enough that Mrs. Powell can keep tabs on her. So it must be a day's walk or a ride. So for me, I would think that there's an opportunity in that to make a run for it and escape to freedom, which I think feeds nicely into what Anne-Marie is going to be talking to you next. So that concludes our high-level overview of Christmas in the 1840s from the Powell family papers. And I look forward to hearing what Anne-Marie has to share with us.
Awesome. And we'll keep Alison on for a few minutes. And yes, let's toast to the Powells. Let's toast to stockings by the bureau and lemons and frozen potatoes.
And to the festive Christmas table.
Festive Christmas table.
And to trying to keep your kids away from the presents for 5 minutes.
Yeah, accurate.
Ugh.
Well, that was a really great segue, Alison. Thank you for that. We're gonna again continue the norm of zooming a little bit more forward in time. So we're gonna go to 1855, and just like Alison was saying, Christmas time was a time of traveling, no matter what tier of society you belonged to. But of course, enslaved communities, they tend to be kind of outside of the scope of a lot of our historical retellings. And so, you know, these enslaved communities belong to the same communities as the white landowners. If you had a family like the Powells who are associated with different families through church, your enslaved peoples would end up being in contact with their enslaved peoples, right? Your family would marry into a family, and enslaved communities would bond that way. So there's a rich network of kinship, of friendship, of workers that really permeate the community in a lot of different ways. A lot of the escaped slave ads that you see coming from places like Loudoun and Fauquier in this time, there'll be a byline in which it says, you know, suspected to be visiting with relatives at blank, you know, a couple of towns away. And we know that the holidays, the holy days, were very popular for these families being able to visit each other. And usually what that would entail is your enslaver kind of writing you a pass saying, you know, such and such has permission to go to X place, to visit relatives, to visit whoever. And this is exactly because, as Alison said, there are these patrollers, these patty rollers, and frankly, any member of the white public that can stop you and demand to know your business and who you think you are and where you think you're going, based purely on your appearance and the color of your skin. But that doesn't mean that there weren't some enterprising individuals who decided to take the opportunity of the relative looseness of rules at the holidays to make a bid for freedom. And so my story is about a small group of those freedom seekers. This escape is most often referred to as the Wanzer-Grigsby slave escape. And it's a group of originally 6 individuals from the Loudoun Fauquier border, kind of that Aldi area down along Route 50, Landmark Road, where again, you had these neighbors and their enslaved peoples were related to one another, married to one another, worked with one another, and together across these barriers of ownership, hatched a plan to escape on Christmas Eve of 1855. So on Christmas Eve of 1855, we have 6 of these individuals gathered together. We have Barnaby Grigsby and his wife, Mary Elizabeth Grigsby, who were enslaved at separate plantations. Mary Elizabeth's sister, Emily, Emily's fiance, Frank Wanzer, and then 2 other individuals who belonged to a 4th enslaver who also were along. So again, it's 6 individuals spread out, across different territory, different connections. And what they do is they all get into this wagon together. This wagon, it's like a general merchandise traveling kind of a wagon. And Frank Wanzer decides that he's going to be the one who's going to drive them. Both Frank and Barnaby are recorded as being mulatto, meaning that they have European ancestry in addition to African ancestry. And Frank himself, he's like blonde, strawberry blonde. He looks very white. So the plan is that this white looking man will be driving these enslaved peoples to and from as a holiday thing. It'll look pretty normal. They should be able to fly under the radar, at least giving them time to get up across the Potomac River and headed north. Their main goal, of course, is to get to Canada, and they're going to take advantage of a pre-existing route along the Underground Railroad to get at least to Pennsylvania to hook them up to the next stop. They managed to get across the Potomac on Christmas Eve of 1855. They cross at Edwards Ferry. While the ferry was owned by a white enslaving family, the ferryman was a free African American. And he was known to be someone who would shuttle freedom seekers across the river. So that's one, piece of knowledge that we have. They managed to get across the river and they make their way into Maryland the night of Christmas Eve, and they spend the night on the road. They're good to go. They're headed north, but by Christmas Day, they're up against it. By the early hours of Christmas Day, 2 of the enslavers, it was William Rogers and Townsend McVeigh, so the individuals who owned Barnaby Grigsby and the 2 sisters, caught on that they were missing. We don't know how they found out. It could have been that there was someone else in the community that gave them away or saw them on the road where they weren't supposed to be, but somehow the enslavers were made aware. So on Christmas morning, there is an ad posted, a wanted ad for these individuals who had escaped less than 24 hours before. And there's Addie. Wonder Woman has entered the chat.
Hi, sweet girl. Wow, Christmas morning, there's an ad. Like,
It's fast.
They were not messing around.
They were not. And it's interesting because it was just those 2 men who posted the ad. So they know that Barnaby is missing, and they know that Mary Elizabeth and Emily are missing. And in the ad, it just says they are probably traveling with others, something to that effect. So they have an inkling that there are other individuals involved, right, in this freedom seeking escape, but they don't know who, and they don't know, the names of those involved. Meanwhile, the 6 individuals who are headed northward through Maryland, they're following the B&O generally northwards up towards Frederick and then out towards Hood's Mill. And at Hood's Mill, they're waylaid by a group of 6 white men. Again, they can be stopped at any time for any reason. And these 6 men are suspicious about these individuals traveling on the road, and so they stop them and demand to know their business. Now, Frank, who's again playing the white man, he tries to play it cool and he says, no gentleman would stop our group on the way they're going. You're trying to call honor into it. But the white men, led by a Mr. Dixon, persist and start to draw their weapons. Now, what these white men are not expecting is for the enslaved peoples, including the women, to pull out pistols and dirks, long knives. So everyone in this wagon is armed. They're pulling out, it's a showdown ready to happen. And Dixon, actually cocks and what's the thing where you do the hammer? I don't know guns, but he's actually making to shoot at these people. At which Emily Foster, the young woman who's engaged to Frank Wanzer, she pulls out her pistol too, and she screams at the guy, shoot, 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 basically daring him to do it. If you're gonna do it, do it. I've got my gun, kind of a thing. And they back off. The white men are so intimidated and surprised to see that these individuals are willing to fight and die, for their freedom, that they kind of slink away,
Right
kind of like cartoon villain style is what I like to imagine. Exactly. So they slink away, and Emily and Frank and Mary Elizabeth and Barnaby manage to get away. They decide that the wagon is too bulky. They lose the wagon, and so they're riding double on the 2 horses. But behind them are those other 2 enslaved peoples who had come with them, who apparently were far enough behind to be out of earshot of what just happened. And so those same 6 white men, managed to pounce on those 2. It's different when odds aren't even. And one of the men, one of the enslaved men, one of the freedom seekers, ends up being shot in the back, and he ends up dying. And the second one is recaptured and imprisoned. And sent back down to Virginia, where he had been enslaved by a neighbor of McVeigh's. So that already gives you a little bit of a glimpse of what the risks were, being a freedom seeker. And that is how Frank Wanzer and the Grigsbys and Emily Foster spent their Christmas day, was then running away from Hood's Mill, continuing northward. They slept outside that night, and the men tried to sleep on their wife and fiancés respectively feet to keep them warm, but the women got frostbite on their feet, and that's Christmas. There's the Nicholas Cresswell and the West Point eggnog, and then it's a whole different side of the coin. The day after Christmas, when they get up the next day, they manage to make it all the way to Columbia, Pennsylvania. So in the course of 3 days, they've gone from near, the Aldie Middleburg area up to Columbia, Pennsylvania, which is not only a railroad hub, but is also an underground railroad hub. There is a man there, William Whipper, who was, again, a free African-American, who actually owned 26 rail cars. And this is one of those fun things where the Underground Railroad is a real railroad.
Literal railroad.
Yes, for a hot second. So the group of them stay there for a few days before William Whipper sends them on a false ended rail car, right? So the rail car has a false end and they're here in this little compartment. Super cool. And he sends them to Philadelphia on the 1st of the new year. From Philadelphia, they're sent to Syracuse. In Syracuse, Emily and Frank finally get married, and they say that when they write down what they did, they like to say they got married on the Underground Railroad, which is really cool.
It's awesome.
And then eventually by late January, they end up in Canada, and they're living in Ontario, where they all remain living together for, perpetuity for the rest of their lives. So that in a nutshell is is their experience. And one of the reasons we know this is because while they are in Philadelphia, another man who works on the Underground Railroad, William Stills, he actually takes down their account. This is another free African American. And as an operative on the Underground Railroad, he writes down the account of everyone who comes through. And in 1872, he publishes a book about them. And it's really fascinating because the sympathy and the empathy that these people are treated with, which they are not treated with when being talked about from their places of origin, right? So in the wanted ads, they are man, woman, they are slave, they are servant, they are property. But in William Stills' account in the book, they are victors, right? Because they've won their freedom. They are esteemed individuals. They are intelligent. They are smart. They are described as being beautiful, you know, as aesthetically pleasing. And it's really, I don't know, it's really poignant to see how many miles away did you have to be seen that way or treated that way. And now that being able to be the record that is left behind. And I wanted to kind of end, there's more to this story, because we do know that one of the members comes back to free other relatives, but I wanted to leave with a description of why these individuals said they left, because that's one thing that William still asks is like, so why escape? Why leave? The myth at the time in the South is that, you know, enslaved people really need direction and ownership, you know, and they really profit from this kind of a lifestyle. And we get a few different examples of why enslaved people did want their freedom. So for Mary Elizabeth and her sister Emily, again, they were enslaved by Townsend McVeigh, kind of on that Fauquier-Loudoun border. And overall, they said that Townsend himself was a decent man, a decent master, but that his wife, Mary, was the real disciplinarian among the two. And that she knew no mercy nor showed any favor. And also that the enslaved people in their, you know, in their community, they were not allowed to own chickens, which when you study enslaved communities, they were really apportioned very little food, and they would often supplement that with their own gardens and their own chicken coops. So if you're limited and you can't have chickens, they're really shortchanging just being able to eat.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because there's sometimes a myth that women enslavers were more compassionate, you know, or that they didn't benefit from slavery. And that's really not true either, as exemplified by Mary Elizabeth and Emily. Frank, for his point of view, he was owned by Luther Sullivan, who he said was the meanest man there was. So that's another kind of an extreme there, is that he was a mean man. Frank's own mother, Frank is about 25 at this point, Frank's own mother and two siblings were sold to Georgia only a few years before 1855. So Frank is living in a household that is teetering, right? Who's next?
Right.
My mother is gone. She's in a state I've never been to. None of us can read or write to send 124 pages of Christmas letters, right?
Mhm.
That's that. And if I stay here, there's no way I can get in contact with her. Sullivan also apparently owed a lot of money, and creditors, as far as Frank knew, creditors were going to come calling. And in talking too about annual like due dates, sometimes those debts, those payments would be called up at the new year. So if we're at Christmas time, I don't know, Frank might be seeing the writing on the wall.
Mhm.
It turns out he was right, by the way. Luther Sullivan ended up in 1860, he had to move to DC. He was out of money and he became a clerk. So, and then last, Barnaby Grigsby was owned by William Rogers at Pheasant's-Eye, which is near Aldie. He said that, you know what, Mr. Rogers is not so bad. But what he said was, I want to live by the sweat of my own brow, as all men ought to live. and so that's it doesn't matter what the treatment was like, you still want your freedom, and so that was really Barnaby's case. So I'm sorry if I brought down the mood.
Hey, they got out.
They did. It's a happy story for those families.
Good for them.
Cheers to the Wandsers and the Grigsbys.
And Marie, our friends at Civil War Trails, I know they're working on a marker near Edwards Ferry for Basil Newman.
Yeah.
And they asked if there's any connection between Basil Newman and anyone you mentioned.
Yes, Basil Newman was among the first generation of Newmans to operate Edwards Ferry. There were 3 generations, and I don't recall the first name, but it was Basil's son or nephew who was running the ferry when the Wandsers and the Grigsbys made their way northwards. I think Basil had already passed away by 1855.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, I've got a story that kind of merges a bit of all the things we talked about. I'm going to cut a good bit out just because I know we are running a bit short on time. But when I looked back at previous episodes, I mentioned Christmas a couple different times. I had told the story of Fleming Anderson, who's murdered on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
That's a little negative.
That's a
Speaking
downer.
of downers, yeah.
Yeah, that's my job. Come on.
So I'm not,
Yeah, Scrooge.
I also told the story of 2 Loudoun Unionists, William Williams and Robert Hollingsworth, who, after months of being political prisoners and back and forth, returned back to Loudoun on Christmas Eve. That's the Hallmark story that I've told, I guess, in the past. So I figured I would just quickly give a few letters of examples of some things we've mentioned. One, issues of slavery in Loudoun, but also not being able to be home in Loudoun. So one soldier in particular leaves a great source of letters during the war. It's William Berkeley from the Aldie area in the 8th Virginia Infantry Regiment within the Army of Northern Virginia. He survives the Civil War. He and his 3 brothers, which all enlist in early 1861, all 4 of them survive the war. And the 4 of them are really leaders of the 8th Virginia. And William Berkeley mentions Christmas in every single year of the war in his writings back and forth to his wife. And his writings are fascinating, all the time. But, when you look specifically for like winter and Christmas, you get a range of everything from talking about the boredom of it and, what they're doing for winter quarters. In 1861, he's talking about how he misses his, he wants to be back with his wife for their anniversary, which is a week before Christmas. 1864, he forgets it by a few days and then has to write a quick makeup letter being like,
Oh,
in the trenches of Petersburg, then I think he gets a pass on that one.
no.
Yeah.
And also, like in 1862, I won't, to save time, I'm not going to read these, but in 1862, he's writing about Fredericksburg and being on the burial duties and seeing the catastrophe and of the carnage that was the Battle of Fredericksburg just less than 2 weeks before Christmas. Ends on a high note for him. He talks about getting invited to Robert E. Lee's for Christmas dinner. So for him,
No
all these
eggnog,
dead
right?
people, but I got to go have dinner. Yeah.
but for one year that I will focus on is 1863, in terms of just picking one out of the 4. 1863, a significant year for him. He and 2 of his, again, there's 4 Berkeley brothers. 3 of them are wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg. 3 of them are found prisoners after Pickett's charge. William being one of them who was wounded and captured. And he writes from prison on Johnson's Island while he's in prison there. So again, he is concerned about not being home in time. So I think his writings in particular that year are worth kind of giving some excerpts from some of his letters to his wife. And again, he's in Johnson's Island in Ohio. And this is after the Battle of Gettysburg. He's recovered. And it's really fascinating, his writings just about prison in general. But for example, on November 24th, he writes about the hope of being home for Christmas. He wrote, "I trust that we shall be exchanged before Christmas, but you must not let the fact of my imprisonment interfere with your enjoyment of life. Make the best of everything and recollect how much we have to be grateful for. In fact, I know of but few who have been so blessed, and I am very comfortably situated and am perfectly safe from the balls and shells that have caused you so much dread." So looking at the bright side of things, well, he's in prison right now, but at least he's not on a battlefield and he's not seeing the things he's done in the past. And he survived the Battle of Gettysburg, which a lot of people in the 8th Virginia did not. A couple weeks after that, again, he writes from prison now, December 11th. He writes, the prospect of my taking my Christmas dinner with you seems very slim at present. You must not let my protracted absence grieve you. My separation from you and my little ones is my only cause for sorrow. He goes on in the same letter to say, have you a Christmas gift for me with which you intend to give me a surprise? I shall feel very anxious until I learn. So give the credit to the guy. I mean, he's still trying to get gifts while he's in prison here.
I mean, milk it, right?
He's
Wow.
doing his best. He's doing his best.
I just want you to be happy, but are you sending me something? Like that's what I'm hearing right there.
Yeah, he's
Your happiness. I just miss the kids.
It's fine.
Also,
Right,
what are
it's
you
fine.
sending me?
It's fascinating to see in his writing too. Again, like very insightful, from comedy to serious to just mundane things that he's bringing up. I mean, he's telling his wife to go down to Richmond to get a portrait taken so he can have. He's asking for all sorts of things throughout the year. What's also fascinating too, to tie into a bit what Alison had talked about and then you just did, he's also frequently writing about the enslaved people of the Berkeley family. And you hear about people like Aaron and Mira, who are either coming back and forth with him as servants in camp and going back and forth between them and Southern Loudoun County. What's fascinating too is that even on Christmas Day in 1861, William is writing about how he misses his wife, misses his children, and within the same letter writes, Dr. Cochran can have Mira for $600. If he objects to the price, I would like to know what he would give. So he's even talking about selling people they enslave on Christmas Day. And that's not uncommon. You see Mira pop up in terms of trying to find the correct price for her. She and others, and also getting into leasing some of their enslaved people and leasing some out themselves. So those pop up within letters. You know, in one letter you can hear about Christmas, you know, the boredom of camp, the enslaved, you know, situation in, you know, the Berkeley family. But back to 1863, the last one I'll read is, you know, they've already realized at this point he's not going to be paroled to be back by Christmas like he was at least initially hoping for. But then on December 18th, again from prison, he writes about how, you know, welcome to the North guy. It's cold. So he's starting to realize, you know, the cold winters as the cold really set in, he writes about. But then he also writes, I shall think very much of you at Christmas, well knowing how much you will think of me. All right, guy, come on. Thinking of you, of course. But then, and how often you will wish for my presence. So I always get a laugh at him, just thinking about how they're thinking about him being back.
Right. I'm thinking about how much you miss me.
But then he goes on to say, it is certainly very hard, but you must always remember how very much harder it is with tens of thousands. It seems very truly wonderful that myself and all my brothers should have passed through the Battle of Gettysburg and none of us lost life or limb.
True.
He mentions that a couple.
That's saying a lot from the 8th Virginia.
He's
like-
mentioned that a couple times that year, writing that, okay, he's writing from prison. He was wounded in it. 3 of the brothers were wounded and in prison. And in multiple letters, he writes about how lucky he is that none of them lost limbs or are dead from Pickett's charge, showing to the, you know, up to 92% casualties that the 8th Virginia took on July 3rd. So fascinating letters from him. He does, of course, eventually get paroled. He spends 1864 forgetting his anniversary in the trenches of Petersburg. And then again, writing each year about kind of how he spends Christmas, each one very different between the 4 years. But very insightful letters. And again, adding to the story that, you know, some can't make it home for Christmas, writing about intentionally, potentially separating people all year, but of course on Christmas Day from family. So kind of fascinating insight for those who are within an army camp during war.
All right.
I will drink to that.
I will
And I will
drink to
also
that.
drink to a free pass for Cannon Fire and Forget's anniversary.
He froze there for a second when they were drinking there. That could have just been my computer.
to all our limbs.
All right. Well, we are going to bid a fond farewell to Alison now. Thank you so much for joining us, Alison. You're always a favorite. I understand you're Amory's mom's favorite. I'm a little upset about that.
Yes.
You've replaced me. But so nice to
Pat
see
is a
you.
big
Have a
fan.
wonderful Christmas. Thank you for joining us. And we will definitely see you in 2021 for sure.
Holidays, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
And I will mention Drew Gruber asked about Lee's eggnog potential at his Christmas party in 1862. Considering the nerd that Robert E. Lee was in his time as West Point and only getting what 1 or 3 demerits, I'm gonna guess it was lacking the whiskey or brandy in the nog.
Yeah, or maybe it came with like a wink and a nod. All right, without further ado, I would like to go ahead and invite our next guest on. You will recognize him from a myriad of programs we've had this year. It is none other than Mr. Jim Taub. Yay!
Jim, get in here.
You're on.
Come on,
Hey.
bud.
I
You're
didn't
on.
see you there. I didn't see you come in. You know
What a
what's sad?
nerd.
Is I had it perfectly set up here to have a great introduction, but the delay on the actual video on Facebook meant that just as I was exiting there, they said, "Hey, let's go talk to Jim."
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm a professional, guys. This is what it means. When you say, "Hey, I'm going to go get a degree in history," this is what's waiting.
This is
You
the
know?
best you can hope for.
This is
Thi-
it. It
this
doesn't
is
get any
it.
better.
It doesn't.
It does not get. Yeah, look at Travis. Look at Joe. This is
They're
the
great.
uniform. This is the life. How are you guys?
This is the uniform.
Doing great. Good to
Good.
see you, man.
Good to see you guys too. Man, I'm really
Tell us-
upset. I was gonna spin in my chair and everything.
Do it. Now you have to.
Okay, wait. Can I? Can we
Yeah.
pretend like I'm coming on again?
Are you corded in? Don't decapitate yourself.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about that. But wait, this is gonna be good. Ready? Oh hey,
Oh, I didn't see you there.
didn't see
What
you
a-
there.
What
I've been
better-
watching lots of
Oh.
Mr. Rogers to prepare. Like,
Oh, casual.
No better way to spin into another century. We've been pretty heavy
Heyo.
hundreds here.
Oh, yeah. Bring us up to the 20th century, Jim.
yes. So
Yeah, tell us all about it.
well, let me tell you, 20th century, boy, if you think the 21st century had some crazy disease and war, boy, it's going to blow your mind. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about World War I. Shocker. It's either, for those of you who have seen me talk with the Piedmont Heritage area, you know, I'm either talking about the best regiment that ever existed in the American Revolutionary War, the 3rd Virginia. And I was contemplating talking about the 3rd on Christmas Eve when they almost basically single-handedly
Single-handedly. Yeah, we'll call it
Single-handedly
that. We'll say that.
defeated the Hessians at Trenton and therefore won the American Revolution. But you know, we're gonna lay off that and we're gonna go to my first true love, which is the First World War. And Travis and Anne-Marie actually reached out to me to talk a little bit about the Christmas truce, which is a very famous event which occurred on Christmas 1914. So it actually is a little bit of British, a little bit of French, a little bit of German history, because Americans weren't involved yet. But we are going to have some American Christmas stories and some Virginia American Christmas stories here at the end, because I know I'm packing it through, try not to run out of time. But the Christmas truce is fascinating. I think because we've just gone through the World War I centenary, a lot of people have become aware of the idea of the Christmas truce. And I know that Travis is generally supposed to be the bummer of the group, based on his amazing plane crash presentations and you know, just general grinchiness.
Let's be clear that every presentation of Travis's is a plane crash presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Boom.
Wow.
That's what
Wow,
you
that
are in my phone.
hurts.
In Travis's defense, he has brought cake into the equation several times.
That's true.
Yeah, true. But speaking of other massive disasters, World War I, crazy disaster. So World War I starts in August 1914 through a wide array of various things. If you've ever seen a pileup in a snowstorm on the highway, that's exactly how World War I
Yeah.
started, just with geopolitics.
Topical.
So,
Love it.
Accurate.
I'm going to keep bringing it in here. Again, professional. So so the world goes to war, except for America, in August of 1914. By December 1914, they're locked on the Western Front in this bitter series of trenches. So armies can't go north because they would run into the Channel. They can't go south because they'd run into neutral Switzerland. So they're just stuck into this horrible siege warfare. We get this idea then that on the 25th of December, the soldiers themselves kind of said, you know what? this kind of sucks. Maybe we'll take the day off. And that did happen occasionally. There's a movie out there called Joyeux Noël, which is an amazing French movie that a lot of people reference to me. It's not how it happened.
What?
It's going to be the
Hey,
big bummer.
I saw that commercial for like Stainsbury or whatever.
Yes.
Isn't that a thing?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's how it happened.
As a proud extra while studying abroad in England of that commercial, we were like, I don't know. Got a lot of chocolate though. So I mean, in the end of the day, historical professionalism, keeping my name, high status, historian, chocolate. Gotta, level out the deal. So I was also in a great movie about the VMI cadets at the Battle of Newmarket, which is a story for another time. But so throughout the Western Front, things have been going absolutely horribly. Just to give you an idea of how bad things were for some of these nations, by the end of December 1914, just on the Western Front, because remember, there's also a front to the east, which surprisingly is called the Eastern Front. The Germans had lost close to 600,000 men as casualties. So we're getting close to American Civil War, all 4.5 years levels of casualties, right? Just in the period between August 1st and December 31st, 1914, France loses more men killed than the United States did during the entirety of the 20th century.
Good
So it
God.
is an absolutely devastating time. And Britain suffers somewhere around 100,000 casualties. We're still not very set on this, but that's the general number historians agree on. So things are going really horribly. Now, all these soldiers far from home, they're experiencing Christmas and they go through it in many different ways. The British get a lot of care packages sent from home. It's very common to get mail sent from home at this time for the British soldiers. Same with the French soldiers as well as the German soldiers. We know there's large amount of Jewish soldiers serving in the German army. They are given passes for Hanukkah in 1914 for the most part, from what we're aware of, but told basically, I know it's 8 days, but you're going to get half a day. So I mean that's fair, right? And so there are all of these experiences. Come Christmas Eve, there is sort of a lull up and down the front. There's intermittent firing. There's still the ever-present artillery. Nothing like you would see later on in the war, though. But it's noticed on both sides of the line that soldiers are starting to observe the Christmas holiday. They will be singing. There are constant British reports, many of which I have here, and I won't read all of them to you, talking about, hey, you know how we're supposed to be like camouflaged? The Germans are putting trees up with lights on them. Can't really figure this one out. So there's other interesting things that the soldiers are doing. The 2nd Battalion of the Suffolk Regiment, which is out of the line resting, is giving a football to being a soccer ball being issued to all companies, and the companies are playing soccer, but unfortunately we got bombed by hostile aircraft and the pitch was destroyed, so we can't play anymore. That's probably the average experience on the Western Front. We start to see a little bit of mingling. We have photographs of soldiers in no man's land, which is that area between the two trenches, actually intermixing with each other, exchanging souvenirs, exchanging alcohol, exchanging food. So it certainly exists. We do see it based on who's working with each other. We know that the Germans did not really want to do this with the French. There's a ongoing animosity. We know that they would prefer to have these sort of truces, and they got along much better with English soldiers, mainly because a lot of Germans had been working in London. A lot of Germans spoke very good English, much like today. I had 2 German roommates in grad school, and I was amazed that they spoke American way gooder than me. So, they're,
You fail English? That's impossible.
Why use many word when small word good? It's fine. But so we know that the Germans tended to get along much better with the English soldiers over, say, Scottish soldiers, and especially soldiers from certain colonies, particularly colonies like India, Africa, where we'd really say it's non-white soldiers, because there was a certain fear that both the British and the German high command had sort of propagated towards these soldiers, saying these are bloodthirsty killers, they don't take prisoners. But it flips around, and it's really the story of not grouping everybody together, because we know that the British and the French, who were venturing out to take part in this truce, really hated the Prussians, which is northeastern section of Germany, like Berlin, that area. They said they're super militaristic. This is all them. They loved the Saxons. And we actually have a report this is from the Cheltenham Chronicle, which is a newspaper in England, and it says it cheers one to see the Germans bailing water out of their trenches too, and also having to dig new ones, like ourselves. They're sharing in our suffering. However, they seem cheery enough and sing all night and play mouth organs. The ones opposite us are Saxons, a better brand than the usual Hun. They shouted across the other morning, "How are you getting on?" Clever how they know who is opposite them. And this soldier writing this letter goes on to say, on Christmas Day, I'm going to put up a huge notice in German. Mein Bitten ein Ruhe. Let us rest. It's splendid those German cruisers being sunk, though. I wish the whole German army had been on board. So there's an interesting sort of, yeah, these guys are cool, but going to keep shooting at them.
Yeah, these guys are cool, but screw them.
Yeah.
Right.
And there seems to be that sort of constant theme. There's an amazing website which I'm pulling these accounts from that'll be free to link to everybody if they want to look and see each British unit on the Western Front in Christmas 1914, what happened to them. I would say 95% don't see anything. They're like another day, or they're out of the line, so they wouldn't have had contacts with Germans. Others have more interesting experiences. The local unit where I was doing my master's degree, the 1st Battalion of the Cameronians, the Scottish Rifles, who were out of Glasgow, have a group of Germans who we think are Saxons based on lining up the maps of both sides, get out of their trench and say, hey, you guys want to take the day off? Come get some
Christmas.
stops.
Yeah.
They are immediately opened up upon with rapid rifle fire.
Yeah,
and
Merry Christmas.
A Scotsman shouts
Keep
out,
the change.
you've been shooting at us for 6 months. Why do you want to be friends with us now?
Ooh,
So-
thanks for the accent on that.
When watching certain movies, it comes out, but otherwise, not so much. So it does happen, but not to the extent that you see often, like in that Sainsbury's commercial. I think it was a Cadbury's chocolate commercial. There was also a bread commercial. But so there are certain instances of this. We know soldiers from the London Rifle Brigade do take part, which is a British territorial, kind of like a National Guard unit, do take part in interactions with German soldiers in no man's land. Critically, and the big expert on this is a guy named Taft Gillingham, who I respect immensely. He's devoted years of research to this, says there is not a single instance having been found of soldiers playing soccer with each other in no man's land. That is a post-war fabrication. The only account we know that mentions that is a guy who did not arrive on the Western Front until 1916.
Boo.
So I'm sorry to sort of break it, but it also, as historians, it gives us a really interesting look as to how do these myths appear.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is,
Yeah.
if we have these commercials, we have this movie, we have all this media that tells us this was a thing.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
this was widespread across the front, that this, common soldiers on each side
So
laid down their arms. How did this happen?
This is what really fascinates me as a historian, as well as the actual physical accounts from the soldiers we know were there. And we know for all time periods we've talked about, people love to claim, hey, I was at the Battle of Gettysburg. Well, you weren't. Favorite monument at the Battle of Gettysburg is the 83rd New York, who were right behind the Pennsylvania monument. And they said, let's put our monument at Gettysburg, even though they were not at the Battle of Gettysburg. This is a kind of similar situation. So there's lots of stuff like this. I think the first real stories you get regarding the Christmas truce come out in the 1960s. It's a very anti-war era, and people want to start to see. I mean, Vietnam's going on for Americans. Likewise, Britain is involved in colonial wars in Malaya and in Africa. So there's this sense of, we want to start seeing this sort of, more peaceful ideal of these soldiers who didn't want to be butchers, following their bungling leaders into action. Blackadder is a perfect example.
And
of
this is also a time period where the original veterans are starting to fade away.
Exactly.
The generation is starting to die off.
Exactly. So they're starting to go away, fade away. And much like you see with, older people, any time period, you can talk to, up through the past few years, you can talk to several World War II vets who could swear they saw something that was actually in the movie Saving Private Ryan. So you do start to see this memory sort of changing, and it's sad. It's natural. It happens with old age, but that happens. But the big pusher is coming back to this movie again. This movie called Joyeux Noël, which I loved as a kid. It means Merry Christmas in French, and it goes into utilizing history for modern day purposes. And that's the main reason the Christmas truce still exists. This myth of the Christmas truce that historians are headstrong and really trying to fight. And this political, and this is something very topical for today, of course. But this political sort of movement is, if you look at the trail at the end of the movie, you'll notice the movie was completely funded by the European Union.
Deep state.
Yeah.
Fake news.
Wow.
So there are these sort of, and it's not a bad message. Hey, maybe Europeans shouldn't fight each other. Maybe nobody should fight each other. I don't know. I'm not
Let's eat chocolate.
Yeah, exactly.
Chocolate and bread.
So it's not, in this case, not necessarily a bad message, but it shows how any sort of message that might work for contemporary people can use history to construe the actual facts of that history. But I'm not going to take up too much more of the time of everybody's time, but I think there's also some really interesting stuff if we step 3 years or 4 years. I can do math. 4 years forward to the year 1918. To America has entered the war. November 11th, the armistice is signed, so fighting's over. But there's 2 million American men and women still in Europe trying to find out how to get home. A big problem the Americans had during World War I was finding enough ships to get all of our men and women from the United States to Europe. What kind of problem do you think they had when they wanted to bring them back? So a lot of these people are stuck there. We know that just like today, I decided I really want to tell this story today because I know, like many other people, I've ordered Christmas presents for people, and hopefully they get here by the time. I know the Postal Service is really struggling now. That was an issue American soldiers faced in Christmas 1918 as well, to the point that General Pershing, the commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, gave each man and woman in American uniform in France one coupon. And you could send this one coupon to someone in the United States saying, "Can I have a Christmas present?" And that was the one package you get. Otherwise, they thought the postal system would be so overwhelmed with packages going to France that nothing would make it, especially food, perishable foods. You know, soldiers were receiving cakes from home. We know that a Virginia regiment, 318th Infantry, gets a massive shipment of hush puppies.
All right.
There's amazing. The Virginia chapter of the Red Cross is sending out packages to soldiers. There are colleges. University of William Mary is sending care packages. I believe that's where that one came from. So there's all this perishable food. So just like today, they're trying to figure out, hey, how do we deal with this massive packages? The soldiers themselves get up to some other ideas, though. And again, I'm going to go back to the 318th Infantry because these boys like to call themselves, this is a Virginia regiment. A lot of these guys had ancestors who fought in Virginia regiments in the Civil War, the Revolution. They're local guys. They're Loudoun County guys. They're Richmond guys. They're Shenandoah guys. So it's a very, connected story. But one of the things they say is there wasn't a lot going on Christmas Day. They were now just in relatively peaceful France because the fighting had stopped. They were scheduling dances. They were scheduling bands. The AEF sends around the band of the Harlem Hellfighters, the famous 369th Infantry, which is in segregated African-American regiment. And they're sending it around because it was supposed to be the best band in France. It's also the only non-military band in the military. They're a jazz band. So they actually are the guys who bring African-American music and culture from the United States to France and start the modern French jazz scene. That really starts with Christmas 1918. But back with these guys, these Virginians just in the middle of rural France, they're trying to figure out what they can do. They say on Christmas Day, the men of the 318th were in each of these small towns, being billeted in these small towns, trying to forget or suppress their own homesickness. However, the men tried to make the day one to be remembered by all of the French youngsters. The entire month's pay was donated to enormous, well-decorated Christmas trees. Each peasant had presents lavishly distributed among the children. Company funds were drawn upon freely to make the day a pleasant one for all of the men, and it was a peculiar genius who had a grouch on that day.
Grouch.
In spite of this absence.
Just call me the peculiar genius.
So that kind of connects in with Joe's earlier theme about the soldiers from the 8th Virginia who were in this case, prisoners of war in the North after the Battle of Gettysburg. But it's a theme that continues on every day to people who are away from home, whether fighting in a war or not. I know I, unfortunately, like many other people, aren't going to be able to see family this year. So I hope, something for people to take away, like the postal service thing that most doughboys and doughgirls, which isn't a term, but I love it, had to deal with. As well as, this is going to be a challenging year, much like 1918 was. It has been a challenging year, and we've gotten through it with a lot of strength. And we have historical precedent to say, listen, things are going to be okay. The Roaring 20s are coming up, and we could drink this time.
Cheers.
So
Cheers.
there we go.
Cheers to that. I would also like to say that a mailable gift coupon sounds like something that a certain Berkeley would have come up with. Oh, I'm here in prison, but here's a coupon. You can send me a present.
Yeah.
Think of me when you get it.
Think of me.
Exactly. Here's that's what I would love to have one to be like, hey, need a new chair from IKEA. But I would love to see what one of those looked like. I have never seen an original one. So I would love to, because I would end up just mailing it out as my Christmas card every year.
Yeah, here you go. Send me a present.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, Anne-Marie and Travis. By the way, just in case you were wondering.
By the way, I like barbecue.
I really like barbecue, and I really like pie in Leesburg is my other new favorite thing.
Mom's apple pie.
Mom's
Shout
apple
out to
pie.
Mom's apple pie.
The lemon bars. Let me tell you. I'm just gonna say.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us, Jim.
Anytime.
Jim, real quick,
yeah.
Some of the comments. Are there any books about, especially by the idea of jazz, I think surprised a lot of people. Any books that you would recommend about that cover some of this stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Are you guys ready for a super high-tech transition brought to you by History on Tap? You ready?
Yes.
I'm not ready.
Whoa, look at that.
Wow.
That was so professional.
So prepared. I love this.
Harlem's Rattlers in the Great War by Dr. Jeffrey Salmon. This is the overall history of the entire Harlem Hellfighters, the 369th Infantry. But it covers why the band was so important to people, especially the African-American community here in the United States, and sort of the American foreign mission in Europe, because they sent them all over war-torn Europe as kind of like a, just this is how good we have it in America. This is American culture. You see this quite often today with things like the Marshall scholarships or various other sort of State Department missions. But this is arguably the first example of it. And it was through the Harlem Hellfighters, which were one of the best fighting regiments in the U.S. Army. Fortunately, it's a sign of the times that they were segregated. It was all African-American soldiers led by white officers, except for the band. The band had African-American officers in charge. James Reese Europe was the conductor, a famous conductor who went around the country recruiting African-American musicians to play in the band of the regiment. But absolutely fascinating book, absolutely fascinating story. And there are several locals in the 369th, of which we talked to a few descendants, I think 2 months ago, just about.
Yeah, just a month ago or so.
Yeah, even though they're called the Harlem Hellfighters, Virginia connections to them as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jim. And speaking of music, one of our most popular episodes this past year was our episode on music, on dance, and on the connections, the historical connections that music brings to us. So it is our great pleasure to welcome back Bess Putnam, not only an incredibly talented musician, but also one of the board members for the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area. And Bess is going to share a little bit of her family's Christmas traditions as well as a song for us.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry, I want to see everybody who's here. And I'm still trying to learn. Hello.
There you go.
Hi, everybody. How are you guys doing?
Good to see you. We're good.
Good to see you, Bess.
You guys look so fun. Are you the Grinch, Travis?
I am the Grinch, yes. Yes.
Wonderful.
You needed very on brand for tonight. So
very on brand.
I love it. So Anne-Marie had asked me to share a Christmas tradition, and ours is kind of a long story. So number one, our tradition that is kind of unique is a Celtic tradition which honors farm animals for being the first to welcome Christ into their homes and into their hearts. And so for every Christmas Eve, we go and hang holly on all the gates for all of our cows. Which leads me to the second part of tonight. I met my husband in middle school, and the plan always was to go west and to be cowboys together. And that was the plan. It just so happened that I only made it about, as a crow flies, half a mile west from where I was born. But we do have about 175 cows at this point. And it turns out that all you need to be a cowboy is to have cows. And so the song that I chose this evening is called Christmas for Cowboys. I actually just heard the song for the first time a couple weeks ago. It's an old John Denver tune. I guess, I guess that's it. Tall in the saddle, we spend Christmas Day driving the cattle over snow-covered plains. All of the good gifts given today, ours is the sky and the wide open range. Back in the cities, they had different ways: football and eggnog and Christmas parades. But I'll take the blanket and I'll take the reins. Christmas for cowboys is to be far away. A campfire for warmth as we stop for the night. The stars overhead are Christmas tree lights. The wind sings a hymn as we bow down to pray. Christmas for cowboys is to be far away. Christmas for cowboys. Christmas for cowboys. Christmas for cowboys. Christmas for cowboys in the wide open range. So in the saddle, we spend Christmas Day driving the cattle over snow-covered plains. So many gifts have been opened today. Ours is the sky and the wide open range. It's Christmas for cowboys. Christmas for cowboys. Christmas for cowboys. Christmas for cowboys in the wide open range.
Thank you so much, Bess.
Thank you, Bess.
Thank you. That is for all the Virginia cattlemen. Merry Christmas.
I'm adding in all of our speakers who joined us tonight. I'm sorry if it's a bit of a surprise if anyone's not on camera, but I wanted us all to have an opportunity to wish all of our viewers at home or wherever you are, to wish you guys happy holidays, safe holidays, and most of all, a very happy new year to all of you guys. Any follow-up notes?
I would look at the comment section if you're going back. We've had some great comments. Andrea, who's been drinking Black Hoof, has been following those, sending some off. So go back and read those. Very entertaining. And again, this has been a tough year for everyone. So I would say thank you for joining us in person and the breweries that have hosted us. Thank you for those who have been guests and watched us either virtually or in person.
So I want to give a good shout out to the scholars who couldn't be with us. You know, we've had so many fantastic guests this year. I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Stephanie Seal Walters, who just graduated the other day. I'm so insanely proud of you, Stephanie. Big shout out to my friend Dr. Jeff Tolbert, who couldn't be here tonight, another one of our guests, and to all the other guests who've joined us this year. It's been a fantastic bit of camaraderie in what otherwise has been a really crazy year. So this has helped to get me through it personally. Thank everyone who's come to the events, either virtually or in person. It's been so wonderful to build this community. So thank you.
And don't forget, in your end of year giving, memberships to any historic nonprofit fit into any stocking, no matter how many frozen potatoes are in them.
Indeed,
Absolutely.
they do.
Loudoun Museum, you also get the stemless wine glass, which can be
Ooh,
That's a decent gift.
just for clarity's sake, I checked. It can be used for bourbon in addition to wine. So it's multi-purpose wine glass you get with a membership.
Glad you did the research there, Joe.
Yeah.
And the Virginia Piedmont Heritage area, we rely on your donations to help further our mission of preservation through education. So I know times are tough, but anything that you can give helps further that mission.
and your gift in response is unlimited Grinch from Travis.
Unlimited Grinch.
Which is going to be awkward in July, but
But you
we're gonna
got
be
it.
there.
That's all
I'm
you got.
already sweating in this thing.
Hey, Bess, if someone wants to hear, do you have like a playlist that we can find somehow of the songs you've done? You know, do you have like a thing to
That's a
look
good
follow?
question. That's a solid question. On Instagram, I have posted little snippets from concerts that I've done, and every once in a while, I just feel moved to post something. I don't know what's on Facebook and what's not. I apologize. I am awful about social media. It makes me super uncomfortable. I don't love any part of it. I do have a website, bluemountainsongbird.com, that I've posted several videos to. You are 100% right. I should probably get on that more.
Definitely check out
Yeah.
Blue Mountain Songbird and stay into next week. VPHA will have a special release featuring Bess Putnam herself. So mark your
Excellent
calendars.
news.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And please have a safe and happy holiday season, and we'll see you in 2021.
See y'all
Cheers.
next
Merry Christmas.
Cheers.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Cheers.